Sam was a 19-year-old boy, the pride and joy of his mother, Mama Nkichi. She was a strong woman, hardened by the harsh realities of life, but her heart was soft when it came to Sam. Widowed young, she had been left to raise him alone. Selling akara by the roadside was how she made a living, standing in the blistering sun, her hands slick with oil, flipping bean cakes for long hours every day. Every kobo she earned was stretched thin to provide for Sam's needs. Her greatest dream was for him to rise above their poverty, to have the education and opportunities she never had. Sam knew how hard his mother worked, yet he always felt the weight of their poverty whenever he was with his friends. They wore new sneakers, crisp shirts, and flashy watches. He'd watch them laugh and boast, feeling the sharp sting of envy. Though he was a bright student, he couldn't shake the feeling that no one saw him when he wasn't dressed as sharply as his friends. The pressure to keep up began to eat at him. At first, Sam resisted. He knew stealing from his mother was wrong, but the temptation to fit in was growing by the day. His friends teased him for wearing the same shoes to school, and the Snickers felt like needles piercing his pride. Slowly, he began taking small amounts from the akara money Mama Nkichi saved in a little tin under her bed. A little here, a little there, just enough to buy a new shirt or sneakers so he could blend in. He told himself he'd replace it when he could, but one new shirt led to another. His friends noticed his new look, and the admiration fueled his actions. The more he spent, the more guilty he felt, but the approval of his friends drowned out his mother's struggles in his mind. Mama Nkechi noticed the money missing, but refused to believe Sam could be stealing from her. She thought she had misplaced it or miscalculated after a long, tiring day. After all, Sam was her son, her reason for working so hard. But the losses became more frequent. She began to watch him more closely, piecing together the changes in his behavior, the new clothes, the sudden need for more pocket money. One evening, Mama Nkichi waited until Sam came home. She sat him down at their small dining table, her hands trembling as she held the tin with the missing money. "Sam," her voice cracked, "why are you doing this to me? I work so hard for us, for you." Sam couldn't look her in the eyes. His guilt weighed heavily, but the desire to impress his friends still clouded his judgment. "Mama, I'm sorry," he whispered, but the apology felt hollow, even to him. Mama Nkichi shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "Do you think your friends care about you, Sam? They will leave you when the money is gone. But me? I will always be here, no matter how little I have. Don't sell your soul for the approval of people who will abandon you." But Sam was stubborn, and at that point, he didn't care. In his mind, she was old-fashioned, stuck in a time when people didn't understand what it meant to be popular, to be someone. His mother's words bounced off him like rain off a tin roof. After graduating from secondary school, Sam was due for university. His mother worked twice as hard, pushing herself beyond her limits to make ends meet. University fees were steep, but Mama Nkechi never wavered. Every kobo she made from selling akara went into Sam's future. She wore the same faded wrapper for years and skipped meals just to save a little extra. Her dream was singular: to see Sam rise above the life she had known, to see him succeed in ways she never could. But Sam, he had other ideas. When the time came for his university admission, he lied to his mother, telling her that he had been admitted to a prestigious school in the city. Mama Nkechi, overjoyed, handed over her hard-earned savings, everything she had scraped together for his tuition, feeding, and rent. Instead of enrolling in school, Sam squandered the money. The thrill of being called a big boy was intoxicating. He bought expensive clothes, the latest sneakers, and went to clubs with his friends. At the club, he would order bottles of the most expensive drinks, sometimes pouring them out just to show he could afford to waste it. He bathed in the attention, feeling invincible as his friends cheered him on. But it wasn't long before reality began to catch up with him. The money ran out quicker than Sam had expected. His nights at the club became fewer and less lavish. Soon the friends who had once called him boss began to ignore his calls. He was drowning in shame and desperation, but he was too proud to return home and face his mother, who was waiting for the results of his non-existent studies. With no money and no real friends left, Sam found himself at a crossroads. He needed to maintain the lifestyle he had become addicted to, and going back to his mother's akara stand was out of the question. That's when one of his friends introduced him to online fraud. It seemed like the easiest way out: quick money, no hard work, and a way to stay on top. At first, Sam hesitated. He remembered his mother's sacrifices, her endless hours frying akara under the hot sun. But the allure of fast cash was too strong. He convinced himself that he was only doing it temporarily, just until he could make enough to pay her back and get his life back on track. Sam dove headfirst into the world of online fraud, learning the ropes quickly. He moved into a modest apartment packed with boys his age, all of them neck-deep in the same game, hustling day and night. Each one of them was chasing that big score, that one deal that would change their lives forever. One by one, Sam watched his housemates succeed, buying flashy cars, designer clothes, and eventually moving out of the shared apartment into their own luxurious homes when their scams finally paid off. Sam, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. Despite working hard, staying up late, and following every tip and trick, the money wasn't flowing his way. His frustration grew with each passing week. His housemates had started treating him like a failure, and Sam felt the weight of their unspoken judgment. He couldn't understand why they were all succeeding while he seemed to be stuck in place. One evening, after yet another failed scam attempt, Sam confided in his closest friend, John. "Why isn't this working for me, bro? I'm doing everything right, but nothing's clicking," Sam said, frustration lacing his voice. John listened for a moment, then leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Look, Sam, there's something I haven't told you. Most of these guys here, the ones who made it, they didn't do it on their own. There's a shortcut." Sam frowned, his curiosity piqued. "Shortcut? What do you mean?" John glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. "It's called Yahoo Plus. You know, you add some spiritual backing to your hustle. It makes everything easier, guarantees success." Sam's heart raced. He had heard whispers about Yahoo Plus, but had always dismissed it as a rumor. Yet, here was John, someone he trusted, telling him it was real. "So that's how they did it?" Sam asked, referring to the boys who had moved out of the apartment. John nodded. "Every single one of them. If you want to really make it, this is the way, bro. I can link you up." Sam hesitated, his mind racing. This wasn't what he had signed up for, but desperation had a way of blurring lines. After a few moments of silence, he said, "All right, take me." The next morning, John took Sam to a shrine deep in the forest. The air was thick with tension as they entered the small, dimly lit room where an elderly man, the priest, sat waiting. His eyes were cold, his face expressionless. Sam felt a shiver run down his spine as the man motioned for him to sit. "You seek wealth, don't you?" the priest asked, his voice low and rasping. Sam nodded, swallowing hard. The priest looked at him, unblinking. "There is a price. Nothing comes for free in this world. You want success? You must make a sacrifice." Sam tensed. "What kind of sacrifice?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The priest's eyes gleamed. "Your mother." Sam's heart dropped. He shot to his feet, unable to believe what he had just heard. "No, I can't do that," he stammered. Without another word, he stormed out of the shrine, his mind reeling in disbelief. He couldn't understand how anyone could even suggest such a thing. His mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him, who had worked her fingers to the bone just so he could have a better life. How could he even think of hurting her? But John ran after him, grabbing his arm. "Sam, wait! Calm down, man!" "Calm down!" Sam yelled. "He wants me to kill my mother, John. How can I calm down?" John sighed heavily, shaking his head. "I know it sounds bad, but listen, man. Every one of those guys who left the apartment rich, they did the same thing. I did it too." Sam's eyes widened in horror. You sacrificed your own mother?" John nodded slowly, his face hard. "Look, Sam, our mothers, they're poor, they're suffering. What are we doing for them by letting them live in poverty? I mean, think about it. Your mother is out there, struggling every day, breaking her back for what? A few pennies? What kind of life is that? This way, you're doing her a favor. She doesn't have to suffer anymore. And you'll have more money than you could ever dream of. Isn't that what she wanted for you?" Sam's mind spun. He wanted to scream, to push John away, but something inside him, fear, desperation, greed, kept him listening. "But she's my mother." John placed a hand on his shoulder. "I get it, bro. It's hard. But think about it. Her life doesn't mean anything right now. She's struggling. You're struggling. This way, at least one of you gets to live. And you'll be able to honor her in ways you never could while she's alive." The words hung in the air, seeping into Sam's thoughts. His resistance wavered. He had watched his mother suffer for as long as he could remember. And for what? She was poor, and so was he. Was John right? Wouldn't it be better if at least one of them made it? After what felt like hours, Sam finally nodded, his voice barely audible. "Okay, I'll do it." John's face broke into a relieved smile. "You're making the right choice, Sam. Trust me." The next day, Sam returned to the shrine, his heart heavy. The priest gave him his instructions. Bring his mother's heart, eyes, and tongue as a sacrifice. Sam felt sick, but he couldn't back out now. The die had been cast. As he walked home that night, his mind raced. Could he really go through with it? Could he really kill the one person who had given up everything for him, all for the sake of wealth and success? But then he remembered John's words. The money, the cars, the houses, and the nagging voice inside him telling him that this was the only way out. It took him a week to finally make up his mind and come up with a plan. A horrifying, cold-blooded plan that made his stomach churn. He convinced himself that this was for the best, that his mother's sacrifice would be for a greater good. But deep down, fear and guilt gnawed at his soul. Sam borrowed his friend's car and returned to the village, putting on a facade of success. He acted as though he had struck gold, boasting about how his life had finally turned around. He told his mother that he wanted to retire her from her struggles, take her to the city where she could live in comfort, far from the blistering sun and the roadside akara stand. Though skeptical at first, Mama and Keiichi, overwhelmed by the thought that her prayers had finally been answered, agreed to follow Sam. After all, wasn't this what she had always dreamed of for her son? She packed her few belongings and followed Sam to a house he had rented but lied about, claiming that he had built it himself with the money from his new job. That night, as they sat down to eat, Sam's hands trembled. He had poured sleeping pills into his mother's food, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched her eat. Mama and Keiichi, trusting her son with all her heart, ate without suspicion. It wasn't long before she grew drowsy, her eyes fluttering as she drifted into unconsciousness. Sam stood over her, the weight of what he was about to do pressing down on him like 1,000 stones. Tears streamed down his face, but the voice inside him urged him on. He couldn't back out now, it was too late. With shaking hands, he carried out the unthinkable, cutting out the parts the priest had demanded, the heart, the eyes, and the tongue. The air was thick with silence, broken only by Sam's ragged breathing. When the act was done, he stood over his mother's lifeless body, numb with shock and disbelief at what he had just done. There was no turning back. All that was left was to dispose of the body and complete the sacrifice. He wrapped what remained of her in a large cloth, loaded her into the trunk of the car, and set out under the cover of night to dispose of the evidence. His mind was racing, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he sped down the deserted road. But fate had other plans. As Sam approached a checkpoint, he saw police officers ahead conducting a routine stop and search. His heart leapt into his throat, and he tried to remain calm, but his sweaty palms and nervous glances betrayed him. When the officers flagged him down, Sam pulled over, praying they would wave him through quickly. But the police weren't satisfied with just looking at his papers. They asked him to open the trunk. Fear surged through Sam's veins, and he hesitated. The officers grew suspicious, and when they opened the trunk, what they found sent shockwaves through the night. There, wrapped in cloth, was the lifeless body of Mama Nkechi. Sam collapsed in a heap, his legs giving way as the reality of what he had done came crashing down. The officers immediately arrested him, and as they questioned him, the floodgates opened. Sam, consumed by guilt and horror, confessed to everything: his involvement in online fraud, the introduction to Yahoo Plus, and the horrific sacrifice of his own mother for the sake of wealth. News of Sam's heinous crimes spread quickly, and his arrest led to a larger investigation. The police tracked down his friends who were involved in similar practices, and one by one, they were all arrested. The once proud big boys were exposed as criminals, their flashy cars and houses now symbols of the lives they had destroyed for fleeting wealth. In the end, Sam and his friends were tried for their crimes, and the evidence against them was overwhelming. The judge showed no mercy, sentencing them all to death by hanging. As Sam sat in his prison cell, awaiting his fate, the weight of his choices suffocated him. He had sacrificed the one person who had loved him unconditionally, all for a promise of success that had led only to ruin. As the day of his execution approached, Sam thought of his mother, her tireless sacrifices, her unending love, and the dreams she had for him. And now, because of his greed and weakness, those dreams had died along with her. In the end, Sam learned the hard way that the pursuit of wealth at any cost leads only to destruction.